how do I forecast future long-term contract revenues if I don't know when they're going to get signed? Right, the crystal ball question. It goes back to the question of how useful is a forecast really? So I'll give an answer to that question. And I love answering cash flow forecasting questions because I love when people go to the trouble of doing cash flow forecasting. It's, magic. Magic starts to happen, especially if you do it on a rolling basis. And especially if you compare the forecast versus the actual, so you can know if your forecasting methodologies, including your people and your processes and your technology, if they're working to help you create a healthier cash position, if they're working to help you avoid sirens and red flags and klaxons, and that wasn't really a klaxon sound that I made. Right? If your forecast goes enough into the future, then it can help you to avoid things like that, as well as say, wow, we're really building up a nice pillow here. That means we'll be able to understand when we'll be able to hire our next fill in the blank director of development, when we're gonna be able to hire our next member of our operating team, our next back office support person, our next, right? You can plan for that, or give existing people a raise for amazing work and helping to increase their cash flow health of the organization. So I love that. So the answer to your question, forecasting future long-term contract revenue. So let's say a long-term contract, like let's say a 3-year contract. If you don't know when they're going to get closed, it always gets tricky. Say you're doing a monthly cash flow forecast, because typically in an organization with long-term contracts, if they don't, whether they're grants, like a 3-year federal grant or a 4-year state grant or a government contract that's say 1, 2, or 3 years, typically in organizations like that, you have a lower volume of such contracts. And if you had a high volume, you can say, an average of 20 per month, right? And you can forecast that, no big deal. But if you're talking about a low volume, you feel like a little naked, like you have to pinpoint when it's going to be, because there's only going to be one, or there's only going to be a couple. What I would recommend is that you do an analysis of historical first invoice months of your long-term contracts and discover whether there's a seasonality to this. And if there is, let's say more contracts close in the summer, then you can forecast more contracts closing in the summer to kick that off. And then of course you marry that with policy. If you do an analysis of history and you say, well, that's what happens, let's continue, fine, forecast that. But if you do an analysis of history and you realize, oh my gosh, all the big contracts are closing in the summer, no wonder we don't have any money every April. Well, in that case, maybe there is something you can do about that, like starting the sales cycle earlier, or speeding up the sales cycle and not taking so long to follow up with people, or having a change in technique, like doing some in-person visits to help network, or shake some hand, do some glad handing, or speed up communications, find out what people's preferred communications are, to help move things along. You never know who you can text instead of email. You never know who you can call instead of wait, or send something in the snail mail. So there are different techniques that you can use to maybe smooth out those revenues during the course of the year. Insights are so powerful when they lead to action that can really make a difference. So that is my advice to you, is to look for any seasonality and historical when contracts begin, and then just make a choice. Are you going to continue that, or are you going to enact new policies to change what that looks like? Either way, you'll be clear on what the future holds and forecast accordingly.